The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped through my mail slot like a snake. I almost threw it away. No return address, just my name scrawled in familiar handwriting. Inside was a glossy brochure for some fancy plastic surgery clinic, complete with before and after photos of women getting nose jobs and facelifts. Attached was a sticky note in my mother's handwriting. "Rachel, I need $18,000 for this procedure. It's important for my self-esteem. PayPal info below." At the bottom, she'd drawn a QR code in black ink, like I was some kind of ATM machine. "No, how are you? No, sorry we haven't talked." Just pure entitlement wrapped in a medical brochure. The brochure itself was expensive looking, printed on thick, glossy paper with gold lettering. "Dr. Hamilton's Aesthetic Surgery Center, where dreams come true," the tagline read. I wondered how she'd even found this place, or who had convinced her she needed $18,000 worth of work done. I stared at that QR code, my hands starting to shake. But it wasn't confusion making me tremble. It was rage, hot, burning rage that had been building for 7 long years. The same rage I felt every Christmas when I saw their perfect family photos on social media. The same rage I swallowed every birthday that passed without a single text. They'd made their choice about me long ago. Now they wanted my money? I paced around my small apartment, clutching the letter. My mind raced back to last Christmas when I'd stumbled across Greg's Instagram post. There they all were. Mom, Greg, his wife, their kids, gathered around a massive Christmas tree, wearing matching red sweaters and huge smiles. I'd scrolled through the comments. Beautiful family, so blessed, perfect holiday vibes. I wasn't in a single photo, not one. They'd had their big family Christmas, and I hadn't even known about it. No invitation, no mention. Like I didn't exist. That night, I'd cried myself to sleep, wondering what I'd done wrong. What made me so unlovable that my own family could erase me so completely? I'd even checked my spam folder, hoping maybe an invitation had gotten lost somewhere. But there was nothing. They'd simply planned around me, as if I'd never been born. Now I walked to my closet and pulled out a dusty storage box I hadn't touched in years. My hands shook as I dug through old cards and letters until I found it. The last letter Mom had sent me 7 years ago. The envelope was yellowed with age, and my name was written in the same handwriting that had just demanded $18,000 from me. "Don't make things harder for everyone, Rachel. Some things are better left alone." The pieces were starting to fit together. Greg had always been the golden child. Even when he screwed up, Mom found ways to praise him. "Greg's so creative," she'd say when he got fired for showing up late. "Greg just needs the right opportunity," she'd explain when he dropped out of college. Meanwhile, I graduated with honors and got a stable job. But somehow, Greg was still the favorite. When I was 25, he'd called me crying. His girlfriend was pregnant, and he needed money for an engagement ring. "Just $5,000, Rachel. I'll pay you back in 6 months, I promise. You're the only one I can count on." Like an idiot, I believed him. I emptied my savings account and handed over everything I had. 6 months turned into a year. A year turned into never. When I finally asked about it, he acted like I was being greedy. "Family doesn't keep score," he'd said with a straight face. I remember how shocked I was by his casual dismissal. I'd worked double shifts at my weekend job to save that money, living on ramen noodles and generic cereal for months. But to him, it was just money that appeared when he needed it. But apparently, family did keep secrets. I logged into an old email account I rarely used anymore and scrolled back through years of messages. There it was, an email chain between Greg and Mom from 3 years ago. The subject line made my blood run cold. "Rachel's situation, Dad's will." I clicked on that email chain with trembling fingers. Greg had written, "Are you sure she won't find out? What if she asks questions?" Mom's response was ice cold, "She won't." I told her there was nothing left after the medical bills. She believed it. Dad had died 4 years ago after a stroke. I'd been devastated, but the family had barely let me participate in the funeral planning. "We've got it handled," Mom kept saying. "Don't worry about anything." 2 weeks after the funeral, I'd asked about Dad's estate. Mom had looked me straight in the eye and said, "Honey, there was nothing left. The medical bills ate everything up." But then Greg got a brand new truck. Mom remodeled her entire kitchen. When I'd mentioned it seemed expensive, she'd snapped, Some of us know how to manage our money better than others. I'd felt guilty for even asking. Now I knew why. The guilt had eaten at me for months. I'd wondered if I was being selfish, thinking about money when Dad had just died. I'd even apologized to Mom for bringing it up, telling her I understood how expensive his care must have been. She'd hugged me and said I was such a good daughter for being so understanding. At the bottom of the email chain was a name I remembered, Mr. Alder, Dad's estate attorney. I opened LinkedIn and searched for him. He was still practicing law downtown, just 20 minutes from my apartment. My heart pounded as I stared at his professional headshot. The next day, I sat in my therapist's office, tissue box within reach. Dr. Martinez had been helping me work through family issues for 2 years, but I'd never told her the whole story. They erased me, I whispered, my voice breaking. For years, they made me feel like I was the problem, like I wasn't worthy of being part of the family. And now they want $18,000 from me. Dr. Martinez leaned forward. How does that make you feel? Used, I said, wiping my eyes. Like I only matter when they need something. But I keep wondering, why me? Why now? If they've managed fine without me for 7 years, why do they suddenly need my money? She was quiet for a moment, then said something that hit me like a lightning bolt. Maybe they think you're the only one who can save them now. Maybe they're not as fine as they pretended to be. I sat up straighter. What if Mom and Greg were in trouble? What if the golden child had finally run out of golden opportunities? I thought about all the expensive things they'd bought after Dad died. Not just Greg's truck and Mom's kitchen, but the vacations I'd seen on social media, the designer clothes, the fancy restaurants. What if they'd spent everything already? What are you thinking? Dr. Martinez asked. I'm thinking it's time to get some answers. I called Mr. Alder's office the next morning. His secretary put me on hold for 10 minutes before he picked up. Rachel? My goodness, I remember you. You're Thomas's daughter. His voice was warm but cautious. Yes, sir. I was wondering if we could talk about my father's estate. I have some questions. There was a long pause. Rachel, that was settled years ago. Is there a problem? Maybe. Could we meet, just informally? Another pause. I shouldn't really discuss closed cases, but your father was a good man. He talked about you often, said you were the only one who ever told him the truth. My throat tightened. Dad had said that about me? There's a coffee shop on 5th Street, Mr. Alder continued. Brew and Bean. Can you meet me there tomorrow at 10? Off the record. Yes, absolutely. Rachel, his voice dropped lower. Bring some identification, and tell me, did you ever receive your father's sealed letter? The one he left specifically for you? My heart stopped. What letter? The question came out as barely a whisper. I felt like the room was spinning around me. Dad had left me a letter, a specific letter, just for me. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. I met Mr. Alder at the coffee shop, my hands shaking as I stirred sugar into my latte. He was older than I remembered, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Your father left specific instructions. He said quietly, you were supposed to receive a sealed letter and copies of all estate documents. Did your mother give you anything? She said there was nothing left, that medical bills took everything. His jaw tightened. Rachel, I need to ask you something important. Do you remember signing any documents after your father's death? Anything about waiving claims or transferring rights? The memory hit me like a truck. When I was 24, right after college, Mom said it was just for taxes. Something about making the paperwork easier. I signed it because I wanted them to approve of me. Mr. Alder pulled out his phone and scrolled through some files. I've been wondering about that document for years. The signature looked right, but something felt off. He showed me a scanned document on his phone. There was my signature, clear as day, waiving all claims to Dad's business assets and property. But the notary line was completely blank. I stared at it in disbelief. How had I been so stupid? I'd been so desperate for my family's acceptance that I'd signed away my inheritance without even reading it properly. The document was typed on official-looking letterhead, but now I could see it was probably just something they'd created themselves. No notary stamp, no witness signature, he whispered. This document was never properly executed. It's not legally binding. That night, Mr. Alder sent me an email marked confidential. Attached was a scan of the original will, the real one my father had filed with his attorney. I opened it with trembling hands and nearly fell off my chair. To my daughter Rachel, who has always been honest with me, even when the truth was difficult to hear. You deserve an equal share of everything I've built. Your integrity means more to me than all the charming words in the world. The will clearly stated that his assets were to be divided equally between his children. I was supposed to inherit 1/3 of his business, 1/3 of his savings, and 1/3 of the house. Instead, I'd gotten nothing. I compared it to a copy of the will that had been filed with the probate court. In that version, my name had been removed entirely. The assets were split only between Mom and Greg. I printed both documents and laid them side by side on my kitchen table. The forgery was obvious once you knew what to look for. Different fonts, slightly different paper quality, and my section had been carefully cut out and reprinted. I could even see faint marks where someone had used correction fluid to cover up parts of my name before photocopying. The whole thing was amateur hour, but it had worked because I'd trusted them completely. They hadn't just forgotten about me. They'd actively stolen from me. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Mom, really thinking about her for the first time in years. She'd always been the one pulling the strings, hadn't she? Perception is reality, she used to say. That was her favorite phrase. She could make anyone believe anything with the right combination of tears and charm. When I was 16, she'd convinced my teacher to change a grade by crying about how stressed our family was. When Greg got arrested for drunk driving, she'd somehow convinced the officer that he was going through a rough patch and got the charges reduced. She was a master manipulator, and I'd been too blind to see it. Even Dad had been afraid of her sometimes. I remembered him backing down from arguments, letting her make decisions about money and family matters. "Whatever makes you happy, Marla," he'd say with defeat in his voice. I got up and checked my phone. Buried in my voicemail was a message I'd never listened to, from Dad's number, dated 3 days before his stroke. I'd probably been too busy with work to notice it at the time, or maybe too overwhelmed with worry about his health. Now I realize that message might have been his last attempt to warn me about what was coming. My hands shook as I pressed play. "Rachel, honey, it's Dad. I need to tell you something important. I put something in the safe at Grandma's house. Something you might need someday. If you ever need proof of anything, it's all there. I love you, sweetheart. You're stronger than you know." I called Aunt Patricia the next morning. She was Dad's sister, and Mom had cut her off years ago after some family disagreement I'd never understood. "Rachel?" Her voice was shocked. "Oh, honey, I've been hoping you'd call for years. Your mother forbade us from contacting you." "She what?" "After your father died, she said you didn't want anything to do with the family anymore. She said you blamed us for not doing enough to help with his medical care." My head spun. "Aunt Patricia, I never said any of that. She told me you all thought I was being dramatic and wanted space." We both went quiet, realizing how thoroughly Mom had manipulated the situation. "Aunt Patricia, Dad left me a voicemail about something in Grandma's safe. Do you know what he meant?" "Oh, honey," she whispered. "I've been waiting for you to ask about that for 4 years. I have the key. Your father made me promise to keep it safe until you needed it." 3 hours later, I was driving to Aunt Patricia's house, with my heart pounding and my mind racing. I thought about all the family gatherings I'd missed, all the cousins I'd lost touch with because Mom had convinced everyone I didn't want to be involved. How many people had she lied to about me? How many relationships had she destroyed with her manipulation? Grandma's old house looked exactly the same. Aunt Patricia led me to the basement, where Grandma's antique safe sat in the corner, covered in dust. "Your father came here 2 weeks before his stroke," she said, inserting the key. "He was agitated, worried about something. He said he needed to protect you from your mother's games." The safe opened with a heavy click. Inside were 3 items: a sealed envelope with my name on it, a small USB drive, and a notarized copy of Dad's will. The real one. I opened Dad's letter with shaking hands. "My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, it means something has gone wrong. Your mother has always been jealous of your independence and integrity. If she tries to erase you from this family or steal what's rightfully yours, use what's on this drive. You have every right to claim what I'm leaving you. If they try to erase you, it means they fear you. Don't let them win. I love you more than you'll ever know, Dad. Tears streamed down my face as I plugged in the USB drive. What I found made my blood run cold. The USB contained dozens of audio files, recordings Dad had made secretly over the past few years. I clicked on one dated just months before his death. Mom's voice filled the room. She's always been too nosy, asking questions about money and business. It'll be so much easier when we don't have to deal with her anymore. Greg's laugh followed. She actually thinks we care about her opinion. Remember when she loaned me that money? I can't believe she was stupid enough to fall for the whole "I'll pay you back" thing. The girl's too trusting for her own good, Mom replied. Makes her easy to handle. I listened to file after file, years of conversations where they mocked me, planned around me, and discussed how to manage me. They talked about me like I was a problem to solve, not a person to love. In the final recording, dated just days before Dad's stroke, I heard him confronting them. You will not cut Rachel out of this family. She's my daughter too. Mom's response was ice cold. Thomas, you need to think about what's best for everyone. Rachel has never fit in here anyway. I saved all the files to my phone, my hands shaking with rage and determination. The game was about to change. I made an appointment with a family law attorney the next week. Marcus Thompson had excellent reviews and experience with estate disputes. I spread all my evidence across his conference table: the forged will, Dad's real will, the blank notary line, and transcripts of the audio recordings. He studied everything carefully, occasionally raising his eyebrows or shaking his head. Rachel, this is textbook estate fraud, he said finally. The forged signature, the missing notary, the altered will. It's all here. Based on what your father left you, we're looking at assets worth at least $250,000 that should have been yours. My heart raced. $250,000. We have a strong case for fraud, and you may be entitled to damages beyond just the inheritance. But I have to ask, are you sure you want to pursue this? Family litigation can get ugly. I thought about that QR code in Mom's letter, demanding $18,000 like I owed her something. I thought about 7 years of exclusion, manipulation, and lies. I don't want to just pursue this, I said. I want to do it smart. I didn't confront them. That would have been too easy, too expected. Instead, I went completely quiet. I didn't respond to Mom's letter. I didn't call Greg. I didn't post anything on social media. I just watched, listened, and collected information. My cousin Jessica texted me a week later. Hey, weird question, but Aunt Marla called my mom asking if you were okay. She seems worried that you haven't responded to some letter? I smiled as I typed back. Just been busy. How's Aunt Marla doing? Honestly, not great. Mom says she's been stressed about money lately. Something about needing surgery but not being able to afford it. She's been calling around asking family members for loans. Interesting. Very interesting. 2 days later, Jessica texted again. OMG, Aunt Marla's freaking out. She told my mom that you haven't answered her letter and she's desperate. Apparently, Uncle Greg can't help because he's having money problems too. I screenshot the message and sent it to my lawyer. The trap was setting itself. I decided to test the waters. I sent Mom a simple text. Got your letter. Let me think about it. Within an hour, my phone rang. Greg's name flashed on the screen. Rachel, thank God you called Mom back. We've been worried sick about you. Oh really? Since when? Come on, don't be like that. Look, I know we haven't talked much lately, but family is family, right? Mom really needs this surgery. It would mean the world if you could help. I agreed to meet him for dinner, knowing exactly what I needed to do. At the restaurant, I positioned my phone carefully and hit record as Greg launched into his pitch. Mom sacrificed everything for us, he said, cutting into his steak. The least we can do is help her when she needs it. You've got a good job, no kids, no major expenses. You can afford it. What about Dad's inheritance? I asked casually. Didn't he leave anything that could help with medical expenses? Greg's face darkened. There was nothing left, Rachel. We've been over this. Mom used everything she had to take care of Dad. You owe her for all the years she supported you. Perfect. I had him saying exactly what I needed. The next morning, I made an anonymous call to the IRS fraud hotline. I reported suspected irregularities in the handling of Thomas Mitchell's estate, including possible tax evasion and fraudulent document filing. I didn't give my name, just the case number and enough details to trigger an investigation. 3 days later, I got a call from my lawyer. Rachel, something interesting happened. The probate court received a request to reopen your father's estate. Apparently someone flagged irregularities in the original filing. I smiled. How long does that usually take? Could be weeks, could be months. But once it's open, all the original documents get reviewed with fresh eyes. If there's fraud, they'll find it. That afternoon, Greg's wife Amanda called me in a panic. Rachel, I don't know what's going on, but Greg is losing his mind. He keeps getting calls from lawyers and says something about Mom's paperwork being wrong. He's blaming her for everything. What's happening? I kept my voice calm and innocent. I have no idea, Amanda. That sounds really stressful for everyone. The dominoes were starting to fall. A week later, the letter arrived. Official courthouse letterhead, addressed to all parties of the Thomas Mitchell estate. Notice of estate reopening due to irregularities in original filing. I read it 3 times, my heart pounding with satisfaction. That evening, Amanda called again, sobbing. Rachel, Greg's employer found out about some legal investigation. They're putting him on administrative leave until it's resolved. We have 3 kids and a mortgage. I don't know what we're going to do. That sounds terrible, I said. Have you talked to Mom about what's going on? She won't take my calls. Greg says she's the one who got them into this mess in the first place. He keeps saying she promised him everything would be fine if they just handled the paperwork correctly. I almost felt sorry for Amanda. She had no idea what her husband and mother-in-law had done. Maybe it's time she paid for her choices, I said quietly. Instead of asking others to pay for her surgery. Amanda went quiet. What do you mean? Nothing. I'm sure it'll all work out. I took my time with the letter. I went to the bank and asked for a crisp new $1 bill. At home, I placed it carefully in a plain white envelope. Then I sat down at my computer and typed, Dear Mother, here is what I owe you for all the love, support, and dignity you gave me over the years. $1. As for the rest of what you're asking for, you'll be hearing from the court soon. Have the day you deserve. Rachel. I printed it on plain paper, folded it neatly, and slipped it into the envelope with the dollar bill. At the post office, I bought a stamp and dropped it in the mailbox. As it disappeared into the slot, I felt lighter than I had in years. The game was almost over. The story hit the local newspaper 2 weeks later. Local family disputes altered will in probate court. While it didn't name names, anyone who knew our family would recognize the details. Greg's boss definitely noticed. Amanda told me he was officially terminated for reputational concerns. Mom's social circle began whispering. Her church friends, her book club, her tennis partners, they all started treating her differently. In small towns, reputations matter, and fraud allegations spread like wildfire. I heard through Jessica that Mom had stopped leaving her house except for necessities. The woman who once loved being the center of attention was now hiding from it. Aunt Patricia sent me a text. Saw the newspaper article. Your father would be so proud of you for standing up for yourself. You've got them exactly where they deserve to be. I smiled as I saved the newspaper clipping in a folder labeled Justice. The court date arrived on a crisp Tuesday morning. I walked into the courthouse wearing my best professional outfit, feeling calmer than I had in months. My lawyer had prepared everything perfectly. We had the forged documents, the audio recordings, the missing notary signature, and testimony from Mr. Alder about the irregularities he'd noticed years ago. Mom and Greg sat across the courtroom with their lawyer, a tired-looking man who clearly knew he was fighting a losing battle. When the judge asked about the unsigned notary line, Greg stammered and stuttered, unable to give a coherent explanation. Your Honor, their lawyer said desperately, my clients maintain that this was simply an oversight in paperwork processing. The judge looked at him over her glasses. An oversight that resulted in one heir being completely removed from the will? That's quite an oversight, counselor. I sat perfectly still, watching justice unfold in real time. When they played the audio recordings in court, you could hear a pin drop. Mom's voice filled the room, cold and calculating as she discussed cutting me out of the family. Greg's face went white as his own voice echoed back, mocking me for loaning him money and calling me stupid for trusting him. Even their lawyer looked uncomfortable as the recordings played on. For the first time in 10 years, I locked eyes with my mother across the courtroom. She looked older, smaller somehow. The woman who had once seemed so powerful now looked like what she really was, a bitter person who had destroyed her own family for money. I felt no satisfaction in her pain, just a deep sadness for what we could have been. When the final recording ended, the judge shook her head. I've seen many cases of family disputes, but this level of deliberate deception is particularly troubling. The verdict was about to come. Based on the evidence presented, the judge said, it is clear that the estate of Thomas Mitchell was improperly handled. The will filed with this court was altered without legal authority, and assets were distributed in direct violation of the deceased's stated wishes. She looked directly at Mom and Greg. The defendant's actions constitute estate fraud, a serious crime that this court does not take lightly. My heart pounded as she continued. I hereby order that Rachel Mitchell is entitled to her full 1/3 share of the estate, including accumulated interest and penalties. Additionally, the defendants will be responsible for all legal fees and court costs. When court ended, I walked outside into the sunshine, feeling like I could breathe freely for the first time in years. Mom appeared beside me on the courthouse steps. Rachel, please, you've ruined us. Greg's lost his job. I can't afford my house payments, and now this. We're family. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but pity. You did this to yourself, Mom. I just refused to let you keep doing it to me. That weekend, I drove to Dad's grave for the first time since the funeral. The headstone was simple. Thomas Mitchell, beloved father and husband. I placed a copy of the court ruling on top of the stone and whispered, I did it right, Dad. I stood up for myself, and I did it the right way. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment I could almost hear his voice. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. I sat there for an hour, telling him about everything that had happened. About the letter Mom sent, about finding his recordings, about the court case, about how I'd finally learned to value myself the way he always had. When I stood to leave, I felt lighter than I had since he died. The little girl who had always needed her family's approval was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her own worth. I walked back to my car with my head held high. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a letter. Not to send, but for myself. I needed to name every betrayal, every moment they'd made me feel small and worthless. I wrote about Christmas mornings where Greg got everything, and I got leftovers. About graduations they missed and achievements they ignored. About the years of being treated like a burden instead of a daughter. I wrote about the day they fired me from my own family, and how long it took me to realize that their rejection said nothing about my worth. When I finished, I took the letter outside and burned it in my fire pit, watching the words turn to ash and float away on the night breeze. A week later, the job offer arrived, a position with a tech company in Seattle, 3,000 miles away from all the toxic history. I accepted immediately. It was time for a fresh start, far away from people who had never deserved me. 3 months later, settled in my new apartment overlooking Puget Sound, I received one final letter from Mom. The return address was a small apartment across town. She'd lost the house. Inside was her familiar handwriting, bitter and blaming. I hope you're happy now. You've destroyed your own family over money. Your father would be ashamed of you. You were always selfish, and this proves it. Don't bother coming to my funeral. I read it once, then walked to my kitchen drawer and pulled out a small frame. Inside was the dollar bill I'd mailed her. She'd returned it with her letter, I suppose as some final insult. I hung the frame on my wall next to my new Seattle City view. It reminded me that sometimes the best payment is the truth, even when it costs everything. My phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Patricia. Saw your new job announcement on LinkedIn. Your dad would be so proud. You've built a beautiful life. I smiled, looking out at the mountains in the distance. She was right. I had built something beautiful, a life free from people who never valued me. Surrounded by colleagues who respected my work, and friends who chose me every day. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's getting free.